Delights.
Yep.
Yeah, but now we can't, talk about our secret nuclear launch codes. I mean, what secret nuclear launch codes? I don't know what you're talking about.
The code is cool.
So suppose it's funny. Was it Sebastian Stan, the guy who plays Winter Soldier? Supposedly people will come up to him and try to activate him.
That sounds awful.
They'll say the code words.
So first of all, that sounds exhausting to deal with.
Yes.
Second of all, what if that worked? What if that activated him and he just started snapping American necks? That'd be on you.
Yeah. It's like, this was your fault.
Those broken spines are on your head.
Didn't know Marvel was actually a documentary series.
I have several questions if that is the case. Wanting my mutant powers to awaken is the equivalent of is the equivalent of J.K. Rowling and everybody waiting for their Hogwarts letter. I'm soon. Even if it was just a stupid mutation, even if it was just you can make your bones squishy, I'd be at least it's something.
I would love for them to introduce mutants by just having one scene where you just see his arm come down and the bone claws of Wolverine just that's on the screen. That would be okay, I'm done. That's my sticker shot right there.
What if Wolverine's bone claws were squishy though?
I'm the worst there is at what I do.
Entertaining kids.
He makes them into little animals and stuff.
Oh, I hate everything about this idea.
It's your power.
I just threw out the dumbest mutation I can think of. You're the one who decided to make weird floppy bone claws a reality.
Sometimes we do not know what we wrought. All right.
Also, if his bones were squishy, how would he get them out? Because it pierces through his skin. How would?
That's awful. That's fucking awesome and awful.
Go to your room.
Yes. We're turning this con around.
I love squeeze cheese.
I will turn this Dragon Con around. You want to go back to digital only?
Problem is, Wolverine's claws are awesome and everything, but in the first X-Men movie, when he's just punching people with his fists,
you can hear the ting.
I'm like, that's
great.
Fucking awful. You don't need bone claws. You just wreck people because I have literally brass knuckles steel knuckles in my hands all the time.
I just deeply enjoyed the ting sound that happened every time he hit somebody. I was like, oh, that's... can that be my ringtone? That's just delightful.
My favorite is actually, I think it's in the second one, where he stabs... No, it's in the first one. He stabs one of the Rikers guys next into the fridge, and when he pulls the dude out, there's little claw mark indentions into the fridge. Because I'm like, oh. Because I think he just went through that guy into the fridge. Sorry, I'm just warming up here.
The next Dead by Daylight killer is going to just be Wolverine. Instead of hooking them, he's just going to stab them to a fridge.
I'm done with that. I'm okay with that.
It's a very, very specific DLC. Where, there are 40 people that want it, but it's there.
Didn't they just add Pyramid Head?
Yeah. They have a bunch of proprietary monsters. And,
I knew they started with their own ideas on them.
They still use a bunch of there's one that's a psychopathic K-pop producer. I wish I was making this up. That's one of the killers in Dead by Daylight, and he's the weakest one, which sucks because he's such a I'm crazy kind of villain, and I love those. But he's just he's got 50 throwing daggers, and that's what he does.
Call me.
And it has the coordinations for the different dances to each of his individual tracks. It's a how to dance.
All right, we got about a minute left, so let me do a quick introduction. Hello. One quick thing: if you hear me coughing or sneezing, it's not because I have COVID. It's because I have terrible allergies and I'm deal with my asthma.
Same.
It's the inhaler.
Let me move these nuts away from you.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll be all right. I am vaccinated. It's just don't freak out. But let us get started with the. Let's see, what's the name of this place again? What are we doing?
The Art of TTRPG
Yeah,
podcast.
the podcasting art of TTRPGs and how to succeed and how to fail. So basically, how to bring your game to life, to people, to your audience. I am Matthew Malice. I am the host and producer of Polyhedron Podcast, an RPG podcast. We've been going for about 5 years or so. And I'll have my co-hosts introduce themselves.
My name is Alex Smith. I am the co-owner of Alpha Comics and Games in Richmond, Virginia. I am also the DM for the actual play podcast Quid Pro Roll. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that gentle smattering of validation.
I'm Tristan Gibbon. I'm a player on Botched Podcast. We've been playing D&D on RSS feed for like 5 or 6 years now.
Awesome.
5.5 almost, yeah. My name is Dennis Robinson, otherwise known as the world's most okayest DM. The title is there for a reason. I am one of the co-creators and the DM for Botched, a D&D podcast like Tristan over here.
Awesome. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you, audience, for coming out today. It is an early Sunday morning here at DragonCon 2021, but we appreciate you for being here.
Just you guys. Everybody else can screw off. You guys are great.
So we're going to get started. So a little backstory about like just why we do RPGs in sort of the digital space. Like we trying to actually bring our stuff to our players. Yeah. And so one of the things I do for my podcast, we do a series of actual plays. They're for patrons only, but we do them as far as like various games because we want to showcase to our audience not only our talent but also mostly just entertain, and for people who like, I don't have a game right now and I want to listen to some friends coming together and having a good time, or hey, we want to showcase these different systems because D&D, big one. I'm sure you guys will talk at great length about that, but like we've done a Training Continuum Anima, Aeon, and we're currently putting out Star Wars, FFG Star Wars. So we have a whole bunch of other games other than D&D that we do. And so that's kind of like why we like to do it for my podcast. What about you guys?
So for us, essentially, we were all fans of another D&D podcast called Nerd Poker with various stand-up comedians like Brian Posehn and stuff like that. And then they went off the air because they got too busy with life, basically. And I believe it was Tristan and
Phil, yeah.
Phil, who got drunk one night and said, hey, we should do a podcast about this.
That sounds great.
Yeah. So our show is we mostly just play with D&D rules, but typically we're very loosey-goosey with the rules. In fact, if somebody decides they want to do something and it's not in the rules, we just roll a high-low. If you get it right, I'll let you do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different gaming systems out there, and whatever one you're familiar with or comfortable with is the right choice for whatever show you're trying to make.
Yeah, 100%. And for us, the show is not about it's an actual play, but most people, when they listen to the show, they talk about how they like the banter, they like the characters, they like the story, the stuff like that. We don't really get bogged down too much in the rule. Like, in fact, when I'm editing the show, I cut out a lot of the time between rolls or the time where people are just sitting there thinking about stuff just to make it go smoother. So these are all things you need to think about as well, because if you just do a straight to tape, sometimes when you're sitting there thinking about your plan or whatever you're going to do, you could sit there for a couple minutes and not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's totally fine at the table. But for like a podcast, that's not as cool. Like some people, might be into that. Some people might not. So it's just one of those things.
It's part about how like authentic you want the experience to be, or how entertaining.
Yeah.
Editing is huge.
Mm-hmm.
So Quid Pro Roll started very differently. It started out, Goblins and Growlers is a local D&D event company in Richmond, Virginia. And they actually approached me after we did an event, my store did an event called DMMD, which is basically a Dungeon Master roundtable workshop. We introduced different themes. And they came, they told me afterwards, basically to steal the idea. And they were like, oh no, we like her philosophy on DMing. We were talking about doing a podcast. Do you want to do this as like a co-promotion thing? So it started out, instead of being like, friends, let's do a podcast, it started as a business transaction that they then became my friends. The biggest thing that I learned upon doing this, because I've been DMing for well over a decade now, is there is a lot of stuff that is acceptable at a home game at your table that is not acceptable on an actual podcast that you are trying to produce for consumption. And one of the biggest things is, please, for the love of God, do not slap completely unedited audio just on the podcast, like just on a podcast feed, and be like, yeah, this is totally fine. There is no way this will be a problem. Because very rarely are people as funny as they think they are at the table. And there have been a couple of times where we've had to scrap just entire episodes gone forever, because we're like, this is awful. This is terrible, and no one will enjoy listening to this. And that's led to a lot of decisions and running games in a way that I wouldn't traditionally do at a home game, because you cannot have an off night if you're producing it for consumption. If you want to phone it in at a home game just because like you got stuff going on, you're really just there to eat pizza and hang out, dope. You cannot do that if you're doing something for like a professional publication.
My wife, for the longest time, for her first D&D game that she's done, she records all the episodes because it's the first time her GMing like a full adventure that she made. She just does it for record keeping. She doesn't do it for anyone's production, no one's entertainment. She's just going, what the hell happened last game or the last two games? So I remember what's going on if I need to go back and listen. And she also likes it because it's entertaining to her, because she remembers all the good times that they've had together as they've gamed. So let's kind of structure this a little bit more. So because you guys have like done this for a long time, how did you succeed? How did you make it?
Well, we started out. We did very little bit of research, and luckily our friend and co-host Phil knew a little bit about sound equipment to begin with. So if you're starting a podcast, you really need to make sure that your sound quality and ability to record is ready, set, so that you can then actually start to produce your show.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna say, and then also learning how to audio edit. So like each one of us sort of like took on a different task on like what to do. But when we first made the show, we bought, I think it was a Yeti mic, stuck it in the middle of the table, and just did one session. We didn't put that out.
Yeah, we recorded
the
that.
idea was we recorded it and then we gave it to people that we knew to listen to see if they liked the actual content. And when they did, we then decided, okay, I think we got a soundboard out of a barn somewhere. We bought some cheap mics, had them on like mic stands and things like that. So it was a little bit more professional of like a setup. And then as time goes on, we just keep upgrading and things like that. So if you go back and listen to our first season, the audio quality is not as good as the second season, which is not as good as like the third season, because we just kept upgrading the mics. So we went from like $10 mics to like, what do we use? Heil PR40s, which are like $400 mics. So like just over time, you just keep upgrading. So even with the cheap equipment, the sound quality is good enough to get people listening, because as Phil always tells us, when people are listening to a podcast, if they listen to it and it doesn't sound good, they'll just move on to something else immediately, and you can't hook them in. You don't get another chance at it at that point.
Another avenue
really.
you can lose.
Yeah.
Please don't buy snowball mics, guys.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Actually, it's funny that you bring up the story about the Yeti mic, because at a buddies, they were like, this is a couple of years ago, they were like, hey Matt, can you listen to the audio quality for us, because we're going to do a Star Wars table, and they just had a Yeti mic like you guys and just stuck it in the middle of the table, put it on the full blast 360-degree recording, and I listened to it going,
which, fun fact, it's not actually for 360 degrees, it's 4 points. So if you're in any of the diagonals, it doesn't hear you.
But it was not the greatest quality, because it all depends on what you're trying to do. If you're just like I said before, if you're just recording for your own edification, your own memory, fine, don't have to worry about it. But if you're trying to put it out there, you need to put some spit and polish on it, or you're not gonna get much traction with it, unless you get a very small niche audience that's like, I love very genuine gaming experiences. But even then, they're gonna want to listen to something that's comfortable to listen to. So if you're not comfortable listening to it, they're probably not comfortable listening to it. So what are some other things that you've done that you think would make a successful RPG into a podcast or an actual play?
So the things that happen with Quid Pro Roll, I think, were a little unique. And the first thing I will say, and I will acknowledge this, we were very, very fortunate. We were very, very lucky. And a lot of that was we had a built-in community from Alpha Comics and Games, like having, the community there, Goblins and Growlers having a community there. We had a built-in people who are like, yeah, I'll listen to these nerds play Dungeons and Dragons for like an hour. Sure, I hang out with them. Which is why when like I meet people that are not my friends who listen to it, I'm like, you're sure you're talking to the right person, right? But the biggest things that I think happened that have really been useful to us is thing number one, we have a stellar audio engineer. You can find him at Amethyst Audiomancer. His name is Gabe. He is a treasure of a human being, and he is a stellar sound engineer. He composes all of the music. He makes all of the sound effects. He does so much work, and he has absolutely made silk purses out of sow's ears on a lot of our episodes. There have been episodes that I've been like, "There's no way this will be like listenable," and then I hear it after he's edited. I'm like, "This is us. We sound great." And I think that is a huge thing that has helped our success. And the other thing that I think has helped is that we approached it very professionally. We did not look at this as a hobby, because it's one of those things that podcasting is wonderful, but for every hour of audio, if you're going to try and create a polished piece, you have about 5 hours of editing for each hour of audio you record, and that's being a little generous. Normally it's longer, especially if you want to put in like music and sound effects.
It all
and
really
everything
depends
like that.
on the level of complexity you want for the audio editing.
And how experienced you are.
Yeah, and how experienced you are.
When
Because
we-
you will just get faster.
Yeah, because when we first started out, I would say we didn't have any sound effects other than just the music and whatnot. And it took about 4 or 5 hours to edit. And then we introduced music and sound effects, and it would take me 8 hours to edit somewhere of like less than a 2-hour podcast. But now that I've been doing it for 5.5 years, now it takes me about 4 hours to edit the same
With
podcast
sound effects.
with sound effects and all that stuff. So
Wow, I must be lazy then. Holy crap.
shortcuts help.
Yes.
But that's one of the things that helped us, is that we approached it as part of our jobs.
Yep.
We
Yes.
approached it very professionally. We did not think that we were just going to, throw something out there and hope for the best. We like they said, we invested money in equipment. We invested time. Even there are times that it's a job. It is not like, let's hang out and play D&D. A lot of times, like, okay, I have to be on. And sometimes you're lying to yourself about being on.
That's an excellent point that I kind of want to piggyback off of. Is this is work. If you're producing thing, you've got to, like you said, treat it professionally. Look at it like this is less about mine and my friends' entertainment and more about the entertainment of others. Now that's something at the get-go. If you're going to produce this, you need to answer that question with you and whoever's involved, period. Because if somebody's like, I'm just here to have fun with my friends, and other people are like, I'm here to become Critical Role, that's going to be a problem. And you can push it down the track, but eventually it's going to come to a head. Because a great story about this is, anyone raise your hand if you know who Matt Koval is, if you're familiar. All right, a couple people. Matt Koval is a really good writer and an excellent GM, and he's put these campaign diaries and sort of lessons about GMing over the many years that he has GM'd. He's been a writer for various video game companies and stuff like that. And he recently, last couple of years, he did Kickstarter. He stopped doing that job and developed his own RPG company. Long story short, recently, after we're going to make a big Critical Role style like studio, and we're going to do this, and he did it. Then COVID hit and all this other stuff, and he sat down going, he just recently released a video going, we can't do this anymore, guys. Not the way that we've done it. My players aren't professional actors or performers. This is not what they're here to do. They don't even want to really be internet celebrities. They just want to play D&D with me. So we're going to do things differently. We're still going to run the Chain of Acheron, which is his game, with those players, but they're going to do it privately. They're going to record. Then they're just going to edit down all of it. And then he's going to do these campaign diaries that are going to be like an hour rather than a full length. You see every minute of the actual play. And everyone in the comment section after that were like, you do you, Matthew. We got you. That's what you need to do. Because something that I've been dealing with, and you guys can maybe contest to this, is sometimes it can be a lot of pressure. If it is work, you've got to deal with it. And it's a lot of pressure, and you could get a lot out of it, but it also can burn you out. And that can lead you to failing and not succeeding. And then just going, well, we did it for like 10 episodes, and we're kind of burnt out, and we don't want to do this anymore. It's too much pressure. It's too much work. So that's something up front that you need to think about, because we're trying to set you up for success, not failure. on that note, from you guys, what are some of the pitfalls that you've run into?
Yeah. So Botched started out as a casual, let's hope for the best and throw something out there. And that started to work for us. And then we decided it's actually a way better idea to try to approach it like a job and be professional. And that did cause tension in the friend group that started it. And unfortunately, we had, I guess, the band kind of broke up partway through. But after treating it like a job, we got a great new cast member and we trudge on.
Yeah. Other things so pitfalls that we avoided. One of the most important things that you can do is consistency. I would put that right up there with sound quality. You need to release an episode every single week. So what we do is we record 2 episodes at a time. Every week on Tuesday, we record 2 episodes. So that way you're making a bank. So if something does happen, or if you're starting to get burned out, you can take like a month break and you're still releasing your episodes. Obviously, somebody still has to edit.
Right before Con, for instance.
Exactly. Right
Doing
before
good work,
Con.
sir.
Yeah. So the consistent. So we've never missed a week in 5.5 years. There was a time where the audio quality got so messed up that we had to end up re-recording the last 6 episodes of our season because it
was awful.
There was something wrong. But we had some backup audio from our Dragon Con episode, or we released one of our Patreon episodes for the audience, something like that. So even then, we still had something we were putting out every single week. So consistency is one of those things that you definitely need to account for and be ready, because as we all know, the biggest problem with a D&D group or RPG group is getting everybody together on a consistent basis, because it always happens where somebody's got something that comes up, and then coinkydink, the next time you're supposed to play, somebody else has something.
The real villain is scheduling.
Yes, the real villain is scheduling.
It always has been, always was.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to needle you a little bit on that.
Okay.
You said those are pitfalls you avoided.
Yeah.
Which one that you didn't avoid? That you think, we did this wrong.
Well,
we
yeah.
had to correct ourselves.
Treating it like a professional thing from the beginning is definitely the pitfall that
I would say
all of us treating it like that.
Yeah.
I would say that a little bit. But even from the beginning, we said somebody's got to learn how to do audio equipment. Somebody's got to learn how to audio edit. So we were treating it kind of professionally. We were also drinking to the point where we were laying on the floor. So it's a little. Hey, it's cool on the floor.
As you do with your friends.
Yeah, which you can't really do. We had a conversation about it.
No drinking before you get to the show.
Drinking before you get to the show.
That sort of thing.
Tristan.
All right.
You can't pregame. You can't pregame.
Don't
D&D.
pregame.
Because then if you're drinking in the game, then you're so sloshy by the end of the game that you're just like this the whole time.
And also, if you're recording and producing your own show, we at the beginning didn't have any kind of redundancy. So now I also can audio edit if Dennis is unable to. So we do 2 Patreon episodes a month that I do the editing for, so that you can't get burnt out.
I was going to say, so that's probably the biggest pitfall we had, that we had people doing too much stuff at once. And it like myself, I was doing the regular episodes, the Patreon episodes, writing everything.
Yeah.
And
doing all the posting.
You were burning yourself out because you were the one, you were the go-to person.
And I have a 40-hour-a-week job and, all this other stuff. So I was burning myself out. So then eventually, I think it was 2 or 3 years into the show, I was like, hey, can somebody else help
do something?
So now it's gotten to the point where it's if I even feel even slightly burned out, I'm like, all right, somebody else pass this one thing to them. So I would say that's we were pretty good about researching, because that's my biggest bit of advice is if you're going to do a show, an RPG podcast, there are so many RPG podcasts out there that you kind of need, and this goes for any podcast really, you need to differentiate yourself from the others in some way.
Mm.
There are a ton of actual play D&D where they just straightforward play the game. Ours is a little different because, like I said, we're very loosey-goosey with the roles, but we're also a bunch of murder hobos. Yeah, rules. But yeah, we're just a bunch of murder hobos, really. So, for instance, we did a Scooby-Doo episode where my character was convinced that every villain was secretly a skeleton because he would rip people's faces off, and there was always a skeleton there. So it was always the skeleton. I was like a half orc with an intelligence of 2.
Oh my!
Yeah.
And you.
So one of the biggest pitfalls that I personally feel like we've run into is not burnout, but exhaustion.
Mm-hmm.
Because we every 2 weeks schedule recording. We record at like, you know, after everybody gets off work, and we will record 2 or 3 episodes at a time, because he's not wrong. One of the best things you can do for yourself is have a few episodes. If you haven't launched yet, have like 10 episodes done before you launch. Even better, have 15, because someone will get the flu. Someone will have a family emergency. Someone will have something, and that's an entire recording session miss, and that's like 2 or 3 episodes just gone.
Yep.
Every year, Gabe, our audio engineer, he works at a summer camp where he has no internet. So there's like a full 2-3 month chunk where we have no Gabe. And a lot of times we sort of made it into a thing that our audience knows about, where we're like, you know, he tries to make as many episodes as he can before then. And then it's like, all right, cool. We recorded a retrospective. We released some Patreon content for, you know, on the main feed. We do have something that comes out every week, even if it's not consistently main feed episodes. One of the things that very recently happened is we're releasing a non-main feed episode this upcoming week, because Gabe's here with us and doesn't have the time to edit an entire episode. But we ended on like a huge cliffhanger moment, like right
Awesome.
before. So like the audience was like, I'm so excited for next episode. And Josh was like, yeah, it's not going to be main feed. And they were like, what? It's like, sorry guys. But rolling back on that is that because we approach it like a job, and because we approach it like a second job after our you know, big boy jobs, it can be a lot of exhaustion. And sometimes that can lead to tension, because sometimes you feel like you've prepared this really great story and like all this cool stuff, and everybody's just tired. Everybody can't be as involved in it as they would be if you guys were just dedicating a Saturday and hanging out. And that can lead to frustration. That can lead to anxiety. That can lead to, again, not burnout, but just you kind of feel defeated sometimes just by the name of the game and the virtue of what kind of work it is. Creative work universally is going to emotionally exhaust you, because it puts yourself out in a way that your average bear doesn't. Anybody who's like an artist or a writer who has submitted their stuff for public consumption knows that it's like, okay, I want your critique, but if you say anything mean, I'll cry, because you're putting yourself out there in a way that most people don't. And when it's something that you're doing collaboratively, that's a lot of mutual trust that you have on top of having to be professional and having they're your friends, and you have all of this stuff that builds up, and it can be a lot to juggle and a lot to carry on your shoulders. The best way that I found to address that has been really open communication between the players and me, and the players and each other. And there's been a lot of like, look, man, I can't do it today. They're just some day, like, it's chill. I can't do it. And the rest of us have pretty universally been like, all right, we'll record some bonus content. That's chill. Go, you take care of you, because your character will not be entertaining if you feel like hot steaming garbage.
That's very true. That's sort of the part of being consistent when he said it, but also being consistent with yourself, pacing yourself. Understanding your own limitations, understanding limitations of your co-host. Also, even if someone does take a break, if they continually keep taking a break, you need to make a more mature decision process of, this person may not be working out for what we're trying to do. Maybe we got to rearrange something. We got to bring somebody, take someone off, put someone new on, something like that. It sucks, because you're friends, you want to have a good time, and role playing is supposed to be relaxing and fun and entertaining. And if you do it for sort of work, as a second job, as it were, it loses some of that magic. But some people get a lot of being creative. You still can get a lot of it. I have my friends who do the actual plays with me, and when they hear the episodes after I've done edited them, they're like, oh, I remember that thing, and that was a really cool thing, and that was such a beautiful moment that we had. And those are the rewarding moments that you get.
One of the funniest things that the entire cast of Quid Pro Rolls happened is, because we record the episodes like 2-3 months before they come out. And what'll happen is we all forget what happened, and all of us will re-listen to it and we're like, God, it would be so funny if I said this right now. And then one of us says it and we're like, we're geniuses.
There's going to be a moment in our Star Wars that's going to come up that is like a perfect little gem of I told you so. Is it an I told you so moment for my character that I can't wait till everyone gets to hear? It's going to be beautiful. I'm going to love it. But on that note, so we've talked a little bit about the success of failures. We got a little bit of time, and looks like we have a pretty decent audience. If anyone has any questions or ideas or thoughts, please raise your hand, or you can go up to the mic and we will talk it out.
Please go up to the mic because it's the only way Twitch is going to be able to hear you.
That too. Thank you.
I got you guys.
By the way, fun fact about podcasting. So the audio editing part is probably the least favorable for most people to try and learn because it is a complicated process, but it actually is a marketable skill that you can then take into like the real world. So for instance, the last 2 jobs I got, a big part of why I got them is because I have all this audio editing experience. In my current job, I do, I'm actually the head of the podcasting department in the office itself. It's a fairly big consulting firm. I'm not allowed to say the name of it. But I also do voiceover for that. So I have voiceovers for like Home Depot and
That's
TSA.
That's great
Google.
for your CV. That's incredible for your CV.
So it's like most people think, okay, it's podcasting. You know, I could maybe do it professionally. But even then, like some of the skills that you get from doing podcasting, even if it's goofy D&D voices or stuff like that, you can